Playing SOMA took me back to the YouTube boom of horror game titles back in 2010. You couldn't fight back, you had some form of visual affliction whenever you saw something that was unsettling, and these unique stories and twists and conclusions that really sat with you as the credits rolled. And that's no different with SOMA, as the game really did an exceptional job and reminded me why horror games like this have the following they do. The story begins with Simon Jarrett, a man who's suffered an accident and brain damage so severe that his life is in constant danger, as he bleeds from his head due to brain swelling. He's contacted by a man named David Munshi, who offers him a chance to take part in an experimental testing that could lead to treatment to help. He drinks some tracer fluid provided by Munshi that will make it easier to see the damages around his brain. He goes in to get a medical head scan that would be done through copying how his brain is working and then running tests on that artificial brain to find solutions that could greatly help him and any others who are suffering with this kind of brain damage. Simon sits in the chair for his scan, which leads to a bright light flashing before the visor comes up and he's somewhere foreign. With David Munshi nowhere to be seen, Simon decides to search around the facility and sees a sign that says Pathos 2, Upsilon. Upsilon is one of the branching areas of many scattered across Pathos 2. He finds an Omni tool, a futuristic keycard that plugs into computers and opens doors throughout the game. As you continue, you find walls burst open with large mutated collections of flesh and machine that are a staple throughout the game's runtime. You also discover that Pathos 2 is a deep underwater facility. You happen across a robot on the ground, wired up to these machine tentacle ports, and the power that's funneling into her means there's an insufficient amount of power going to the radio signal. As you unplug one, she begs you not to, and with the final plug she asks why, that she was happy and okay. This small moment haunted me, as I felt that this wouldn't be the last decision I would have to make to progress that would strip life from another. Over the radio, you're contacted by Catherine from Site Lambda, who tells you to make it to the comm center as the signal is too weak to hold a long-form conversation before the signal drops. While heading over to the comm center, you meet Carl, a robot who is calling out for Amy as you enter the room. His injuries lead to him begging you to find a medic. This conversation spirals into you informing him you see a robot, but he reassures you he's human. Meters away though, you find his body against a wall, dead. To use a system I needed powered, I flipped a switch which led to Carl screeching in pain in the background. As I pulled the lever, I worked fast to get what I needed done in the comm center before the doors closed behind me. I still searched for Amy, but during a conversation with Catherine, the walls collapsed in and filled up the room with water. I climbed outside into an open seabed and made my way to another entrance to get back into the facility. I felt terrible that I couldn't save Carl or find Amy to help him, but then I came to the conclusion Amy must have been the first robot I saw. After making it back into the facility, I stumbled across a woman wired through, but not as a robot, but as a human. This machine wouldn't let her die, and she asked if I saw Masters or Holland that Amy needed help. You need to restore the power, and removing the connections will get the shuttle station back online. Amy winces in pain as you pull the first connection, and unfortunately passes as you pull the second. But if this was Amy, then who was the robot at the beginning? You power up the shuttle and make your way to Lambda to meet up with Catherine, but shortly after you're derailed by an obstruction within the pipeline. Simon must make his way outside to travel the seabed once more on foot to make it to Lambda. After arriving at Lambda, Simon meets Catherine as a robot on the floor asking for help. Simon feels deflated as he was hoping she would be someone human, so he wasn't the last one, but she informs Simon that he's no more human than she is, as he too is a scan of the original imprint on the body of a dead woman by the name of Imogen Reed inside a diving suit. Catherine needs help with the project she was working on called the Ark. This Ark is a digitized utopia for scans of people's conscience to be uploaded to. A beautiful place to live after the devastation that befell Earth after the comets hit. The Ark is to be launched into space where it will be powered by solar panels for years to come. With Catherine's robotic body damaged beyond repair, she decides that she'll attach herself to the Omni tool and come with you. This makes speaking to Catherine only possible when she's plugged into a system, leaving moments between quiet and tense. You discover that the Ark is located at Tau site deep in the abyss, and the quickest way to get there would be by taking a deep water submarine called the Dunbar. Unfortunately, the Dunbar is locked off and requires a cipher code to get access, which is only known by Brandon 1. Luckily, he has a scan of his mind that we can run through simulations to find out the code. You run these simulations but find that he becomes quick to anger and refuses to give up the answers. So we search his living quarters and find that he was romantically involved with a woman called Alice. We use this information to manipulate the simulation to have Alice request the cipher, before thanking Brandon and shutting him down. This feels dirty, to manipulate his conscience into handing over the code, but we needed it to make it to Tau. Like the first robot and Amy, we couldn't save them, and we need to do what we did to progress onwards. It was a necessary evil. When powering up the system to get access to the Dunbar, it begins to thrash around while cursing out Catherine as it has a conscience inside it, before falling into the depths of the sea. With the option to take the Dunbar off the table, Catherine tells us of another way, by the means of a heavy-duty lift. But to take that option, Simon needs to get a sturdy diving rig to handle the water pressure. The heavy-duty diving suits are at Omicron site, so he finds a way over and makes his way into a secondary entrance as the primary door has malfunctioned. Simon finds a power suit, and Catherine informs him that he'll need 3 components to make the body work, as the corpse of the woman called Raleigh Herber remains inside: a battery pack, a cortex, and structure gel. These 3 components will make it possible to reanimate the corpse and have a dedicated location to copy Simon's conscience to. Once you have gathered all of these, Catherine asks you to take a seat so she can copy you over to the power suit, which is a success, but with a slight disturbing result in the eyes of Simon. 2 Simons exist now, and he comes to terms with the fact that this Simon in the chair will be left here alone with all that remains at Pathos 2, while we escape on the Ark. Catherine gives you the option to power him off or leave him, which ultimately falls on what you decide is morally right in your eyes. As you descend into the abyss, Simon is met with a haunting figure that is oddly excited for your arrival, saying he will make preparations, before disappearing as you continue to descend. When finally reaching the bottom of the lift, you make your way on foot to Tau site, while staying in the light as best you can to avoid the aggression of mutated fish. Upon arriving at Tau and searching for the Ark, you meet Sarah Lindwall, the last remaining human hooked up to a life support, as she protects the Ark. She agrees to letting you take the Ark and requests you turn off her life support so she can pass away. Simon pleads with her to maybe not go through with it, but ultimately her mind's made up and this isn't a life she wishes to live. Now with the Ark finally in your possession, you attach it to a cargo line that takes it through to Phi site, so it can be launched into space with the Omega space gun. Unfortunately, the path is blocked off for you, and you're guided by a ghostly figure that has been stalking you for the later portion of the game. By this point, you've deduced that this is Johann Ross, who wishes to stop the WoW, and the structure gel that was used on your new body carries a toxin that can kill it. He guides you to Site Alpha, where he tells you to place your hand into the WoW to stop it, which leads to it tearing off your arm. With the WoW failing, Johann tells you he must kill you to be certain that the WoW can't return. As he promises you a quick death, the Leviathan crashes up through the floor and eats him as you stumble to escape. The panic sets in as you run through the open abyss to Phi, while the Leviathan chases you down, jumping from light source to light source, hiding in narrow areas. You finally make it to Phi. Once inside, you find Catherine, the original, who was accidentally killed during an argument with a colleague that got heated. You find a shell to place the Ark into before making your way to the Omega space gun. As you sit down in the chair, Catherine begins to organise copying you both over to the Ark. And while the stress of watching the timer go down and the copy progress go up, it hits 100% just in time for you both to be copied over. And finally, after everything that you've endured and suffered through, all the terror and harm that has fallen on you, you're copied and sent off to the Ark. The rays of light break through the trees, the grass flowing in the wind, and the peace this brings that you made everything you fought for worth it, to be in a safe space as you finally meet Catherine in person. Running and hiding when in danger is the only way to survive in this game, and while it's far from the first game to implement these mechanics, it still manages to do them well, with thrills and chills lurking behind each corner. You'll find logs to read or listen to, memories of objects, people and robots, and then there's puzzles to figure out as you make your way through the facility. In my opinion, games like these aren't known for gameplay. They're known for the fear, that unsettling, unknown feeling that sends shivers up your spine, that morbid curiosity that has you double checking each dark corner just in case something could be there. And when you close the game down, you keep lights on because your imagination is running wild with this tainted horror experience. The atmosphere of Pathos 2, Inside and Out, are unsettling and quiet by design, which depicts that cold loneliness for you to mentally suffer in. Now, I think a deep water setting is one of the scariest locations you can put a player. Don't get me wrong, horror in space or some form of cosmic horror is terrifying, but to me I feel like the deep underwater, further than where the light can reach, where creatures are unknown on a planet that you call home, that freaks me out. You don't spend a great deal of time outside of Pathos 2's facility, but the time you're out there is a beautiful and peaceful dream to someone and a paranoid horror of a nightmare to others in a vast void of sea. Pathos 2's internal structure is more carefully crafted than outside, as room and hallways are narrow to claustrophobic as they continue to paint that feeling of dread through each second spent within the facility. The walls are bursting open, machines are in piles, and this fleshy concentration of black goo that has bonded it all together like some kind of overgrowth machine. With each section of Pathos 2 carrying its own disturbing variation on its former self, you become more at ease as you sink back deeper into the shadows. Firstly, the WoW, an AI that has been corrupted through exposure to structure gel, with its primary function to preserve human life, which it does in a way that feels rather inhumane. People's consciences are placed inside robots, and if they aren't capable of being powered by their own machine, they're hooked up and powered through a power source. Amy, one of the few humans you meet, is wired through and being kept alive by the WoW. The WoW is what's bursting out of the walls and floors, the piles of technology that's grouped up in areas, and what has caused the horrific mutation in the game as the infection has spread across all of Pathos 2. I think one of the key reasons that the enemies are so terrifying is how they're used in the world and how they fit. These horrific sights are the crew, warped and twisted by the WoW's protocol to maintain human life and the structure gel. In my opinion, there are 3 categories of enemies. There's robotic, which is basically your simple robots that have been augmented to carry an aggression towards anything they see. They're primarily only represented in the early parts of the game. Then there's humanoid, which is the members of the crew that were stationed on Pathos 2. Mutated with flesh and tech, they do have different variances to them, as some can only sense you when you are close, others have an incredible hearing to the point that turning on your torch makes them aware of your location. And then you just have the fully aware common sense humanoids, who are fast to react and difficult to avoid, as they're able to open doors and keep up with you at full sprint. The humanoid enemies are present throughout the entire game. And finally, Deep Sea, as the structure gel leak fed into the water and mutated sea creatures. You have an anglerfish which waits for you to get close to its light before punishing who fell for the bait, viperfish which hunt in packs, and surprisingly enough, I never saw them, as I stayed close to the light as often as I could. And finally, Leviathan, this monstrous squid that continuously follows Simon on his journey through the abyss. These enemies are only present in the abyss section of the game. While these creatures are terrifying to look at least it should bring you some peace that you got away from them on the Ark. But that isn't exactly how the ending goes. See, you did get copied over to the Ark and got fired off into space successfully, but in reality, you're the Simon that remains in the abyss. Simon was ignorant to this through the game. He had been told that this isn't being transferred and that he's making a copy of himself to get on the Ark. This fills him with rage as he screams at Catherine about how she lied about them getting on the Ark. Catherine fires back as their argument begins, and then the systems hit critical failure. Darkness engulfs the surrounding as you reach out to the screen and you call on Catherine and ask her not to leave you alone. This leads to a heartbreaking conclusion for Simon. As the game fades to black, you realise that this will be his grave. Simon sees copies. Simon is a copy, constantly looking past this horrific truth to try and hold on to what faith he has, that making it to the Ark is possible. But the writing was on the wall, and Simon chose to ignore the possibility that he might be the one who remains. It's kind of odd that Simon at the end of the game refers to the copies on the Ark as "they're not us," as if his identity is any more real when he's a copy himself. This scratches the complexity of how we would handle clones, as in if you take away the biological markers of being human, then how would we even know the difference? Could anyone? If the consciousness is perfectly replicated, then it would be near impossible to know unless it was documented. This just really made me think about how minds try to rationalize and make sense of things. The game becomes this coin toss of, am I playing these moments out or am I playing out the memory? For the copy never experienced what happened before, it simply has the memory of it and continues on. For example, Simon you play as from the start is just a memory of the original organic Simon, and then you continue on. But that isn't entirely true, as once you're copied to the new suit, the first copy still remains. Which just made me realise that everything up to that point was an inherited memory of the copy before. The only issue I have with SOMA is how so many trained professionals in their respected fields don't understand what copy means. Like, while looking over the footage of what I recorded, Catherine says copy so many times. It just doesn't make sense. Sure, you could argue the fact that people are in such a desperate state of thinking that they're trying to rationalise it in a way where they can be saved, but still, it's just not that difficult a premise to understand. From the early moments of confusion to the final moments of dread, SOMA has such an interesting take on the horror genre. It felt tense and unnerving during its entire runtime on Pathos 2, and I feel I wouldn't find a horror title that will top this for a while. It was interesting how it tugged on my moral compass when making decisions, and while it's certainly easier to look at this as these are machines, copies, not the real thing, that doesn't change how the human essence still remains. Simon sees himself as flesh and bones from the start, and later comes to terms with the fact that that wasn't the case. We played through SOMA as a copy of the original Simon Jarrett, but did we see a difference? Did it feel more artificial? Does that make our emotions less human? I personally don't think so, but it left me with plenty to ponder about in the grand schemes of how one can view life. These situations are obviously not something that we'll have to face, but still makes you think. Thank you for watching through this verbal assault about SOMA. I really enjoyed it, and I know I missed out so much stuff, but I didn't want to make a video of me talking for hours. Let me know if I got anything wrong or what your favourite things are about SOMA. I'd love to hear about it. Anyway, I hope you have a lovely day and or evening, and I'll catch you next time.